This episode may include making fun of other people or things that are objectively funny, but is in no way meant to imply that we are better than other people or that they are living out of alignment with what the imagination chose to express through them. I feel like I've seen enlightenment, and I thought it was going to be about levitating and telekinesis, and it's actually just about an increased awareness of how annoying I am. In our defense, we have recorded somewhere between 4 and 6 episodes.
Have we recorded that many?
Dude, we did a cranky teardown of the Benito guy we didn't put out.
Oh, right.
We did an hours long when you were like deep in download energy. Your downloads. You remember that one?
Oh, yeah. And they were like pretty incoherent and triggery.
It was just like fresh, hot off the presses download. Yeah. We did a cranky teardown of
Sir Robert Grant.
We did an attempt to talk about the Rogan documentary that we watched, but then I couldn't remember why I wanted to talk about that. And then we did one right after that about the simulacrum or something. So we did 6 episodes we've not put out.
Well, aren't you guys excited? We've been recording a bunch and we haven't been sharing them with you. Sorry.
It's hard when it's so funny how much just like a tiny stressor as you're going into a podcast. For me, a tiny stressor will change the vibe of the podcast. And it because in the middle of this, we had norovirus going through the house. We had some personal things going on that were very stressful. We're in the process of building a 5th bedroom so my oldest daughter can move back in. All the move happening.
There's a lot of life going on.
A lot of life going on. And it's funny when we're talking about something like Edward Grant or, what was the other one where I was really cranky? The Rogan one or something. I end up sounding way more invested or triggered or something than I actually am, but it's like has nothing to do with that. It's because there's a kid in the next room throwing up. You know what I mean? And so, I'd rather put out one episode a month that I feel really good about. And by good about, I just mean like, this feels like authentic. I mean everything I say here. I hate when I'm editing a podcast and I'm like, I don't even believe this. What am I? I'm just angsty in the moment,
Yeah, I feel like we get, when we're in those like kind of cranky vibes, it's more difficult to stay open and wide and kind of like neutral about things. You get like hyper focused on a certain thing that then the tone becomes like agitated and you're trying to like deconstruct something that doesn't need to be like deconstructed to the bottom of it, but the tone gets off, the focus of the podcast gets like weird and like super zoomed in, but then it doesn't really matter. I think it's hard to kind of, I don't know, podcasting, like you always say, it is a kind of an art form, and you want to be able to be authentic and share, but then have it be some kind of coherent thought or something that like can be tangibly helpful to somebody and not just like a bunch of noise. Yeah. And so it's hard to refine it. Like you're trying to be in the moment and authentic, and then you go back to edit it and you're like, this isn't even anything that I really want to stand on as a piece of content or something. So it's a funny
I enjoy
dance.
Ranting and making fun of things, but I feel like a lesson I learned in the past is that if I'm putting a lot of that criticism out into the world, I don't really like the people that resonate with it. You know what I mean? So it's one thing if it's like lighthearted and jokey or whatever. It's another thing if I'm like taking the moral superior route, which is what it sounds like when I'm cranky.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are times like we come across something and then we will have a little masturbatory, morally superior talk about it. But then typically when we're not on a mic, by the one of us or both of us are like, all right, yeah, well, how do I do this?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think we've put out one of those episodes about the internet when we're just like, you were in winter depression and I was deep in the throes of grief. And then you listen back and it just sounds like two old people being like kids these days. You know what I mean? Well, do we want to talk about any of the things that we covered?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be a couple things that like come up just in conversation that we could veer back into some of those things and just be more like hot spotted with it, consciousness circles.
Yeah, I mean, I think like several of the episodes we did could be combined into the thing I wanted to talk about with the Rogan Elephant Graveyard YouTube series that we watched a long while ago now. Was the premise of it was just basically like Rogan built this little empire of podcasting and a comedy club so that he could live in a reality in which he's a good stand-up comedian. And then everyone goes along with him being a good stand-up comedian because he has all this power. And I want to get into the weeds of
personalities
and all that stuff. I don't know the guy. And comedy's subjective, but I wouldn't say he's a phenomenal stand-up. I wouldn't say that anyone thinks he's a phenomenal stand-up. He's a very good podcaster. Obviously, he's created that whole thing. But this is something kind of the emperor's new clothes phenomenon that I've been seeing a lot. And then you got like Donald Trump, who's like shitting his pants, and everyone around him is pretending that he's not shitting his pants, or he's like, you know, seems pretty far into dementia. And the president before him was pretty far into dementia. And, you know, most of Congress is on death's door. And everyone's just pretending that this is normal, and reality just keeps getting fucking weirder and weirder. And the thing where, because someone has money, success, power, people will pretend that your reality is real is something that's becoming very obvious to me. And it's not just people with money, power. It's also really like narcissistic people, emotionally immature people. Like, I had a friend who told me when I first met her that everyone in her life had abandoned her at some point for being too much. She was my biggest wound. And I subconsciously in that moment goes, I'm going to be the best friend to her, and I'm never going to tell her that. And then if I could give a log line to the stress of being her friend, it's that she puts too much. She expects too much. She flops too much trauma. She is in 24/7 crisis, and really like grates on the nervous system. And you can't, it was this perfect setup where I can not only never tell her, this is too much, your expectations of me as a friend or whatever is too much. I could never tell her that because I was like programmed at the beginning, and that's on me for not setting boundaries. But I think of all the times in my life where I'm around an emotionally erratic person. I'm trying not to say narcissist, but like people who don't take responsibility for their own stuff, or people who are living in a grandiose delusion that for some reason, whether it be social expectation or people pleasing or whatever, I'm expected to uphold a reality for them. I'm not expected. I am. I'm taking it upon myself to uphold a reality for them to avoid conflict, or because everyone else is holding it up, or whatever, you know, the station in life that the person's at. You know, I've had many bosses, you know, or like people in comedy that you just kind of have to go along with their delusions so that you can survive that environment. And I'm thinking about what a mechanism of the cross of planning that is, because the cross of planning is not interested in truth. It's not interested in complexity, which is what would be necessary, right? Is like, this person experiences themselves as grandiose. Here's other people's perception or whatever, you know? The cross of planning cares about keeping things continuous and as secure and safe and unchanging as possible so that infrastructure can be built. And it's like, whoever has the best narrative opens the server, and everyone else is playing the game that person has created. And then the ladder climbing or competition is about who's going to get to own the narrative in as big of a game as possible. So that's where you get like fame and billionaires and everything else, where in the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix, this understanding that like, I'm in my own game, you're in your own game. You can experience yourself as this grandiose thing, and I can experience you as shitting your pants. And those two things, like, there's like an understanding that those two things exist. So what's happening right now is this kind of veil lifting in which people who still rely on owning a narrative that everyone can see is not true, but they're not letting themselves see it's not true. You know, it wasn't like I was consciously thinking you are too much. It was one of those things that I realized after twisting myself into pretzels for 7 years. I can't do this anymore. What is this? And then I finally let myself see like, oh, it's too much. And I would never let myself see that because I subconsciously made a decision that I was like subconsciously competing with all the people before in her life. So I'm like, I'm better than them, so I'm never going to tell you that. And then I don't let myself see it, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I think the core part of it, I mean, it's a really clear example within the Rogan sphere, or maybe I resonate with that more, the way it is happening around someone like Rogan, who essentially is just very popular, has a podcast that is powerful. And so anybody that's associated with him would love to be able to be on his podcast because they can get attention towards their thing, whatever that is, right? So that's like a currency in the social system. And with the experience that I had in the band of being, you know, having decent success where I all of a sudden in my social life, like I had way more value than I did before because of my association with the success. And that's exciting in the beginning, especially if you're somebody that like feels like you haven't been seen, and so you're getting recognition and you're developing new connections with people. And what I would start to notice, like I would experience it a little bit, but other people that were also successful, or other people in the band that get more attention, I would notice the performative aspect that most people would engage with when around these people. And then, so if I'm like if we're at like, I'm at Coachella, and so there's like a ton of different huge bands there, you know, and we're in the middle somewhere, you know, like as on the hierarchy of like super mega famous. And I would be with a group of people, and then we would end up hanging out for a little bit with some mega star, and watch all of these people that I was just with, not around that person, turn into these like different people completely, and say things to that person that weren't really true, or weren't really honest. Like this person could have told me something 10 minutes ago, not in the room, and then I would know their opinion on that, or their belief on that. And then around this person, when the famous person like holds the countering belief that they just told me, all of a sudden this person says that they're that, you know. And I would start to notice it to just be like weird, like people are not. But I think I knew too that it's like, well, you get something from being in association with this person. So there's a value that everyone's kind of chasing, and I would equate it down to just power essentially.
Yeah.
It shows up in all these different ways. But what is interesting is that it's almost always motivated by like, I'm trying to preserve something here. I'm going to go along with their narrative and not be honest because I'm trying to preserve some value for myself, or I'm trying to gain a value from this other person. And vibes and like how you actually feel about them, around them, like energetically wise, like isn't really a consideration as value. It's just a thing. So if I'm hanging out with like a mega famous person and I want to be associated with them because I want my art to be that big as well, I'll deal with them being an asshole for a long time. If I know that I'm getting closer to being able to like be on their podcast, or like be a band that opens for them, or just be a friend that you invite over, and like how cool I'm in this circle now. So I'll kind of overlook that, like, really this person's like kind of a dick and kind of cocky, you know, but like, oh, whatever. So you just overlook those things until eventually you do get burned by them. Like you said, with your personal friendship with this person, eventually you're just like carrying all of their anxiety. It's like, this isn't worth it. You burn out, and then you have to like not be friends. So I'm saying all of that because I think we said this on a podcast that we did not release, but thinking about the cross of sleeping phoenix that we're going into, and somewhere in that reality, I would imagine like abundance, the natural state of abundance within this experience of the earth and things, and having a lot of tech that, you know, we're misusing, but could be aligned pretty quickly into a way where a lot of issues that were in this cross of planning, as it crescendos into this like final, like it's just not working anymore. That competition game that there is, you will overlook somebody's like who they really are because you're trying to get something, is not going to be a mechanism anymore. It's not going to hold value if you're in a reality that's pretty abundant. So the example I use that's very simple is if I need some work done on the house, and it's a plumber, and they come over. I'm paying them to come over, and I hear he's a really great plumber, and I need a good plumber because the issue's big. And so the guy shows up, and he's like a complete asshole. Again, I'm going to overlook that because I need the thing that you're gifted at, which is plumbing, and that's what I'm paying for. I'm not paying for you to hang out with me. So I'll just deal with that because the value I'm focused on is getting the thing, paying money and getting it. Now, if we live in a reality where, it might be way down, I don't think it's that far down the road, but like money is not a thing and there is endless production of things and it's abundant. So if I have a plumbing problem, I can just go get the part, come back and fix it. And I don't have to pay for that. There's no pressure. It's just whatever. I guess the roundabout way is the value, the like currency in Cross the Sleeping Phoenix seems to be lining up to be vibes and energy. And like, is it enjoyable to be around you? Do I miss you when you're not here? When you come into the room, are you making everyone feel good and, whatever? And it's not like love and light stuff. It's just being authentic and real. Like, what is your real energy like?
So it's like resonance. And like, it's not going to be a thing where there's any reason to like deal with somebody that you're just not in resonance with because everything will be abundant and be taken care of, and if I need a plumber, I'm most likely going to benefit more from somebody that I like knows a good hang, a good vibe. And I think we've already kind of been doing this in our house. Like I think we've talked about before when we do need somebody to do something we're a lot of DIYing around here. I love doing that stuff, but tiling is something that I've always just been like, I can do it. I've done it. I just don't like it. And we found a tile guy like early when we were here that he's a good vibe. And that was the primary thing. We got lucky. And his work's really good because he's approaching it like an artist. He like cares about it. And we could just hang out with him. Like we bought him lunch a bunch of times. They hung out. We all ate. I'm always like, pranking him and having a good time. He's a good vibe. And the work is so much better that way because he cares about it. There's a relationship. He's not going to short. You mean cracking jokes. Mark's not pranking him.
I do prank him. Yeah, that's what I mean. You know what I mean.
Just people
I'm comfortable with him. I'm vulnerable, so it's like I can joke around. But so I think that's like it's an interesting thing because I do think that's the new modality, and it's also interesting because you can't fake that. This thing that's going on with like a Rogan, everybody's lifting it up and kind of agreeing that he's this comedy god when really they just want association with it,
right? But like, I don't even know.
You just can't. Like the words aren't gonna work anymore. How a lot of people can say the right thing and still hold up this idea of themselves publicly, but you can't fake. Like when you're around somebody and it feels off, like there's no faking it. And so I love it as a gauge to actually for people to be able to find resonant individuals. But I do think what's interesting, just lastly, is that you were talking about your story with that person, and at one point you said, it's on me. It was on me, like it wasn't on that person. And that's what's interesting here is it does require what a lot of people are trying to figure out is boundaries, being authentically bold, but like compassionate. So not like coming out of this vitriolic place and like saying somebody's doing something wrong and you're actually not that. It's actually just being able to be real and authentic and be like, hey, I don't resonate with this. And I don't, if we're going to be friends, like I can't deal with your crazy shit you're always bringing to the table. Or a little more complicated and different with somebody that's as famous as Joe is that, and this is why I'm always going on about fame of how it can be very dangerous is probably a lot of people that have been around him that are comedians throughout his like growth in this podcast that never really thought he was a really great comedian, but the way he engages and says things, sometimes he's acting as if he is this pinnacle because it's really his podcast is big. But if you had people around you, have friends that compassionately were like, hey, but Joe, let's just be real here. Like, I love your podcast and I think you're a great guy and like you are funny, but just let's keep things in balance here, is that there you are in this like different, I don't know how you would say it, right?
Yeah.
So I can't even come up with the right way to delicately
I don't know
keep
that you
somebody
do.
humble.
I don't know that you do. So that the reason that this was like interesting as a concept, first of all, these documentaries, like I don't know these guys. So it's like when I'm watching stuff like this, I like to watch gossipy stuff.
Biased takes, yeah.
Yeah,
Very, like,
but
biased.
it is like, I like to watch it just I don't know, because it's like juicy and interesting, but I use it to kind of like study humans or whatever. I don't know if this is true. It's pretty compelling. It is always a little bit like, oh, interesting when he talks about comedy. It is kind of an open secret in comedy that it's just like, I would say I'm a far better podcaster than I am comedian, like all day long. I'm not that great of a comedian. I'm a good writer and I can perform if I practice and practice and practice, but I can't like get on stage and be good, be funny in the moment or whatever. I would have never survived this like crowd work era, you know, because I'm not that, I have like delayed processing. I'm not funny on my feet like that. I'm like pretty aware of that. And I do believe that like stand up was bringing me to podcasting, and I'm fine with that. It is also subjective. So I could be wrong. He could have a huge fan base I don't know about. I just thought it was a compelling argument or just a compelling perspective, an interesting perspective to play with, because in my personal life, and I think it's very easy, and I don't want to get lost in the sauce of, you have all this like you have all this life experience with the fame thing, but in my life have seen it way more in a avoiding conflict way.
Yeah, well, and it's similar for me. Like I experienced the other side of it with avoiding conflict, that I think is the core part of this too. Which is what I'm saying is like being able to be bold and make boundaries is like, you have to be able to handle a bit of conflict. It's going to be perceived conflict because there is a tension within like that. And I think the onus is a bit on everybody, right? Like is making sure that we're not avoiding being authentic in some situation, because it's the perceived conflict of it. Yeah.
So in the situation of like, let's say that Rogan has created this whole thing so that he could LARP as a bomb comedian or whatever, and then everyone just plays along. I don't really resonate with crossing into people's aura to burst their bubble or whatever. So that's not a great example for that one, because I'm like...
as I was explaining, I was like, it's way more nuanced, and I don't know the real issues with the dude, obviously.
The thing about that that's interesting to me is like, are people playing along? Do people think he's a bad comedian? And if so, are they playing along and then consciously going, this dude's a bad comedian, I don't know what he's thinking? Or are they doing the thing that I'm talking about where you push that into your shadow and you're just like, the emperor's clothes are beautiful. Like you don't even...
And I think that's a really interesting conversation, because I think they're both happening.
Right.
And that's what I would say is more common with when it's a power person like that. The motivation for the people that are associated with someone in power, that motivation to get whatever that power is in whatever way will dominate the field of thought that naturally would come up, that would be like, this person's like not that great of a comedian, and then be authentically that without having to say it directly. But that's having like good friends around you. If you're in a powerful position and you have somebody that's always not afraid to be authentic, even in conflict, but also is not trying to get something from you in their shadow subconsciously that they're not aware of. So I experienced that. I experienced a lot of people getting around me and them not knowing that the only reason they're friends with me is because they're trying to get something.
Right.
And I figured that out when I did something that that didn't approve with their lifestyle. They like didn't even blink an eye and went the other direction.
Well, you did that as you were leaving the band, so you weren't a source of anything beneficial.
Totally. But then it's I think that's a huge part of it when it's in power, and then maybe on a more personal level where it's not as clear as like a power grab or an association. It's probably more the other thing you're saying, where it's like they're just avoiding conflict, and it is consciously like coming up, but they're not confrontational about it,
Yeah. So I'm in the process of like processing a long-term relationship that I had where I was with someone who used nagging, like constant tiny criticism, to steer people around them. And I think because of how my childhood was, I like had a hyper vigilant. I'm sensitive to rejection. I'm afraid of I've worked through a lot of stuff, but like hypersensitivity to rejection, hypersensitivity to like criticism because it feels like rejection, and sensitivity to shifts in mood or whatever, right? Because my mom would go from totally fine joking around to like just snap. And so before doing nervous system work, I had this hypervigilance about me that could sense if the tone was going to change and was constantly neutralizing people. And so I attracted, what is the word I want? Erratic, volatile people who would switch very fast and go from totally fine. I don't know. These kind of people tend to be very interesting, artistic, funny, smart. You know what I mean? But then would like turn on you quick. And so I think because I grew up around that, I like attracted a lot of that, and then was very sensitive to neutralizing those kind of people in a way. So I hardcore people pleaser, hardcore fawn, trauma response, avoidance, like all these things, right? And so in this dynamic, I did not clock it when it's happening because I am someone who you cannot, like literally you can't tell me what to do. I will, you have to like suggest things in a certain way because I do have like my nervous system is very wired to protect my autonomy. So I didn't clock this at all, but this person would just quote unquote jokingly nag almost every single thing I did. What are those shoes? Where you go? Oh, again? You're going to get coffee again? Oh, you're going to eat again? Oh, you're going to Oh, I guess I'll clean this up. And so I didn't realize, but in this very long-term relationship, I became just like an assistant or like what do you call it? Like a supporting role in this person's main character syndrome, and thought that I didn't want to pursue my own art and thought that I didn't want to pursue all these things. And it wasn't until literally, I don't want to get into the weeds of my personal life, but like, it wasn't until years later where I had to speak to this person again. And I realized like, oh, I feel like I have to come up with a narrative that they're going to like about this decision that I'm making, which is how it was with my mother. And it's not like that at all with you, like at all. And then I'm like, oh my God, I had to do that for years and years and years where I couldn't make even the most, I'm going to an open mic. I couldn't say, now, if I said I'm going to an open mic and you said no, I would be like, this is what my first husband said. I won a comedy competition my 9th time on stage and I got professional gigs. I was a professional comedian after my 9th time on stage in the late 90s. And we got home from that. He said, hey, this whole thing was very cute. No wife of mine is going to be traveling around doing stand up. And I said, okay, do you want to keep the cat? And that was it. That was the end of our marriage. You're not going to tell me what I can and cannot fucking do. So you can't control me that way. But if I care about you, and you, not anymore, not anymore, because I woke up to this, but like this person would critique the open mic, the people at the open mic, the things at the open mic. It was like critical in a way that was like, I don't know how to describe it, to where then it was like programming my subconscious. And I go, I don't want to go to the open mic. And next thing you know, it's like, I want to be a homeschooling housewife in the suburbs, just supporting my husband's career and stuff is crazy. And then when I woke up from that, I didn't even really wake up from it. Just thought the aliens came and got me and took me off that timeline. And then years later, when I had to talk to them about a decision we were making, I know, and I had learned a lot and healed a lot. I'm like, oh my God, my voice is shaking. I'm afraid to admit it. And then he's critiquing the shit out of it. And I was like, oh dude, I thought this is what a marriage was. With you, I remember being like, I'm going to go on Vyvanse, which you weren't a fan of at the time. And you're like, I don't like love that. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do it. So, and you're like, all right, well, cool. You know what I mean? Like, it's your decision. I'm not in charge of you. So, and that's so many light years. But anyway, it's the thing I'm trying to get to. It's the thing where I didn't know I was living in a false, for me, reality, because this person needed their reality propped up. So going back to Benito.
Yeah, and Robert Grant. I mean,
and Robert Grant.
Those are really great examples because Benito is like pretty obvious. It's like way more, it's loud. But for the victims that got through it, they would say they didn't even fucking notice, right? So the Robert Grant one is like, it's a little slick in there. It's a little more subtle. So it would be cool to unpack that. But that's what I think there's something, I've heard somebody on TikTok talking about, and the narcissist word is like, it's hard. Everybody uses it like in so many different contexts. But this was a metaphysical woman, like healer teacher on TikTok. I trust a lot of things she says. And she has this overarching thing of like, this is, it's a narcissistic collapse. I think you use this term too, but she maybe says it in a different way. But essentially trying to kind of, we're using it as like, you could associate as like a huge theme of Cross of Planning is the energy that expresses itself in what we would put a lot of traits on as narcissistic, but that can come across like culturally narcissistic systems and how they function within society all have that element. And then when you're interacting with certain individuals that like have been programmed by those elements of the reality a lot in their life, that's how they associate connection is like through those mechanisms. And they're really advanced as far as like, they don't even detect that it's bad what they're doing. And sometimes it's not even like they're consciously trying to manipulate someone so they can feed or get what it's all like automated. And so there's people that are like very unconscious, and not really in the driver's seat, that energy, that narcissistic energy just can channel right through so easily. And so because I experienced the same thing with like a crazy pretzel of psychology that I experience is that one, you take on somebody else's reality and belief of you, which comes through the negging, and then you can get disoriented and stop doing something that is truly authentic to you because it's being judged harshly. And so you'll try to find something else that is not authentic, but vibes with this other person. And so then you think you like it because you're getting recognition for it. But what was another layer for me is that, and you kind of mentioned, is that you start to, when you're interacting with that person in the reality, every thought and thing that you really do want to do, you're trying to look at it in all these other angles in ways that you can, when you present it to them, that they won't neg it, or you can hide what the authentic thing is around what you're getting them to perceive you doing. That's narcissistic to do.
Yeah.
Right? So you've lifted the program that was being thrown at you and you're doing it now back to them. So you're manipulating on top of it with them, and then they're living in a false reality too, and that's what, like, for me, I got cornered into I cannot be myself. And I don't even know what that is like anymore. And you start to, I was really like everything that I was authentically me. I was so critical in my head on and so judgmental. Like you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. I didn't know that was coming from this person. Like I thought it was me having a midlife crisis or something, which there's many things happening to me when all of this occurred. But That's what is so gnarly to me. It's like a pretzel of psychological manipulation where then you start doing the narcissism thing too. And so seeing it as this kind of virus that has come from such a long experience in reality with this competitive kind of style across the planning, like that, it's a virus thing that you can pick up yourself, even if you're relatively like already authentic and conscious. There's this, like, when you're interacting with it and you continue to stay in those relationships, you just eventually start doing it.
Well, so going all the way back to like main character, the episode we did called Main Character. So you have, and then the conditioning of the cross of planning. So the conditioning of the cross of planning is this tribal collective thing. So it's constantly looking to merge as many people into one perception as possible. So we have this mechanism when someone is talking about something with an air of authority, we're going, is that the truth? Is this the truth? Instead of going, this is this person's perspective. Like, we live on a mirror ball. Every one of us is a square on the mirror ball. We are all looking at the same room, but we each only have a little piece of it. So if when, this person would be like, oh, you're going to go to open mic. If I would have been holding complexity, I would have gone, he's not a creative. He doesn't understand the need to be creative. Or, you know what I mean? Or he wants me to stay home and cook dinner or something. You know what I mean? I would have been like, that's his perspective. But even though I mentally understood perspective, my conditioning was still telling me that, like, whoever speaks with the most authority has the capital T truth, because across of planning was a collective game. So you're constantly looking for someone's truth. We'll get into Edward Grant next. But like, the thing about Edward Grant is, like, he's on his own journey of figuring something out himself, but he's like collecting people who are following him. Like, he has the thing because he's the main character in his movie and people are making him the main character in their movie. So this person, this dynamic that I'm talking about in my personal life is not on them. They weren't consciously like hand wringing, whatever. They are just someone with main character syndrome. Like, they believe they are the center of the universe. This person doesn't have a shit ton of like maybe now, but like didn't have a lot of introspection, didn't have a lot of, it doesn't, like naturally consider other people. And I am at the time very impressionable and so avoidant of conflict that I'll get myself into situations that are like crazy because I'm just avoiding getting yelled at. If I sense that this person is still can't think of the word that I want, but like emotionally erratic or like gonna go become unreasonable, I'll just fawn. I don't know that I'm doing that. So this dynamic was a reflection of my internalized disempowerment. And so a lot of the way that the whole society here in the United States is set up is a reflection of our collective disempowerment. We give all of our power to the systems, to the corrupt politicians, to the billionaires, because we believe that we are not worthy or powerful enough or able to use our own agency, whatever. And there must be like some program in me that is like, I saw this with having a platform, I, up until very recently, felt extremely vulnerable to unreasonable, erratic people. And I was so terrified of talking into microphones for a good period there because the erratic shame, the people that want you to be ashamed, people were terrifying to me, and they will find you if you're talking into a microphone. And, I only recently within the last year realized like, oh, that is a reflection of the guy that abused me as a kid and my mom. And so I've been able to take that power back. But so the mechanism of people falling in line to follow someone who has main character syndrome is not on the main character syndrome person. It's on us for not, because they can't introspect. So I don't even like the narcissist label or whatever, because I don't want to paint people into a corner. I'm not saying they can't change. I'm not saying they're bad. They're just not thinking about, it's not their job to make sure I stay in my power. And so in that situation, it's not like, hey, you're not a good comedian. That's not even a really good example. But like in my situation, if I had been introspecting and I had been in my power, I would have recognized, like, I'm trying to make a decision to keep this person constantly happy with me. And I wouldn't have been with them for very long if I would have woken up to this. Because in some ways, the entire thing was that. But I didn't realize the way in which I was giving up my agency. And
there's like those vulnerabilities that we're not aware of that we have. Because I when I think back about it, and we talk a lot about this, if we've ever gotten, I mean, it's just rare that we've gotten in each other's nervous systems like tangled much. But there's always this, if you're stable and you're not like, there's not an insecurity that you're holding in the present moment. I think this fluctuates, but if you're like stable and like, you came at me with something like, are you going to go down to the studio again? You've been down there like the last 4 nights. I would have just been like, you're going to go sit in the bathtub again? You fucking, what, I would have joked back. I would have sent the thing right back at you.
Yeah.
And if it's in an honest way, I could already detect like the thing that is your weakness that like, I know it's a vice of yours or something, but then I can just fucking fire on that thing. Or you want to pick on, our own, you can weaponize it. Not weaponize it. I mean like you just mirror it back and it immediately neutralizes the thing and the person actually doesn't continue doing it. You could get it, or if they do, this starts to become like, why are we together? You just like neg me all the time and I'm out,
Yeah.
And being in your power and being able to like, in a trickstery way, like, but it feels like comedic or pranky, as I said earlier, but like you kind of give that back. It's so effective with this narcissistic kind of energy that comes at like through people. Sometimes it so reflects it and like really does neutralize it, or reveals more and more the obvious path of like, I'm not supposed to be in this situation with this person. Right. It's funny because when I look back I've had that experience with different people in my life, I would say probably, but from this awareness of understanding all of those things now, if I think back about specific situations, I could have so easily handled it if I was in my power like that and just fed it right back.
You don't even have to, it could just be like, why do you need something? Like,
yeah,
do you have
like
a feeling you need to identify?
Exactly. Like just putting it in its place right away is all that needed to be done. It was so simple, but I instead had 5 years of 60, whatever.
Lying, making excuses.
Yeah, and then I'm starting to do it and be like, why am I like this? I'm like manipulating people right now. I was never like this. And like, I don't even like doing it. What am I doing?
Right.
I spent so much time like getting lost in that world. And it's frustrating to look back and be like, all it was just a simple response back. But you go through the whole thing to learn, I didn't realize how freaking insecure I've been my whole life.
Yeah. And with the people in my life, like my mom and other people in my life that I've had this kind of dynamic with, they say no one will hate you learning boundaries more than the people who benefited from you having no boundaries. But when I tell you what a toothless tiger that is,
oh my God, it's crazy.
Because now I am just like, no, I don't want to do that. No, I don't like that. So I'm so different now. And then they almost don't know what to do. It almost takes their breath away when I'm like that now. And it's not aggressive. Oh, but going back to like, let's say the Rogan thing, the Rogan documentary is a true perspective, right? Which I don't know these people, so I can't say, but I wouldn't say someone needs to like burst his bubble or whatever, because that's weird and intrusive, but like,
if people were giving genuine reflections, we wouldn't, even as people outside the circle, perceive that there's like something weird going on. It wouldn't. If people are authentic and like have clear mirrors back to somebody in that position, they wouldn't elevate themselves into that position. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Sorry, we're on a tornado warning. Just FYI, does not look like it.
What? Yeah, I don't think that's real. It's like a beautiful day.
Oh, why are you sending me that in my notification? Sorry, that was 2 days ago.
Oh.
Thanks.
That was when there really was one when we were
Yeah.
Here,
But the way I'm starting to see it is like each person is opening a server to play a game. And we're all doing that with our own games. But in the cross of planning, you wanted to get as many people into your game as possible because it propped up the reality more. And now it's important to understand that everyone's playing their own games. And if someone is a supporting character in your game, understanding that they also are playing their own game. And this main character syndrome type person is, I don't think they're bad, or some of them you have to go no contact with because they won't leave you alone. But like it just understanding like that person has main character syndrome. They're not considering other people. They don't see you as anything other than an accessory in their life. And so it's your job to protect your agency and, manage the proximity to this person, because if this person doesn't see you as your own person in your own game, and it can be really subtle, you know what I mean? Because I catch it in myself sometimes where I wish that people were behaving a certain way or showing up a certain way, or even in our dynamic, you've been in super download energy, and I feel like so you're kind of in your own world right now doing your own thing. And while like philosophically, I think it's great that we're both doing whatever we want, whenever we want, there is a victim consciousness part of me that can come in very easily and be like, oh, he usually would do this or whatever. And it's like, I've had to wrestle with that part of me, I think, because I'm doing an interdependence course and my algorithm loves to show me places I might be being a hypocrite. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, you're going to teach this and you're going to live it for the next 6 weeks, bitch. And so I've had to wrestle with a part of me that is like, well, I like this version of you that is this for me. And then it's like, well, is that in the soul's best interest? But then on the other hand, the opposite side of that is only considering the other person and orbiting them, which is like also a thing what I feel like I did in this relationship was just ended up playing a supporting character to someone. And I didn't know I was doing this. I thought I wanted to do that because I was so preoccupied with because it's a huge shadow to be afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of people being mad at you, afraid of conflict. Like these are things that can really like distort your reality because they will have you believing things you don't believe and saying things you don't believe and doing things you don't believe without even knowing it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's easy to go like, oh, blinded by fame or whatever. That's one that's really easy to see. And I don't know, dude, it's like constant for me. It's like, remember the window guy came over, we had to buy windows and that guy held us hostage for like, and you're funny because you're a people pleaser, but you're also will just like run out of space so fast. So I think you were like, I have to go to the grocery store because this guy was like hanging out and would not stop talking.
Yeah, I just leave it to you. It's like, I know how to get out of here. I just, I used to call it Houdini. I just kind of like disappear out of the image while you're talking and then I'm gone.
I'm stuck with him because I have to do the credit application.
But no, I think I've gotten better now where I don't like, it is interesting. You're right. I think when I cut you off, you were saying, it still happens in like weird scenarios that you almost like don't know it's happening until after, just right after. But there's something to me, I think it's like when I'm out of energy, it's I'm susceptible to it, or I'm, in a lower place, depression or something that like is going on. But I've noticed like when I'm feeling good and I'm kind of embodied and I do have energy and I'm content and my consciousness is like higher frequency, I'm just feeling good. I don't have any problem letting the Capricorn kind of just, this is what it is, and kind of cold, like, thank you, move on. Like, it's not angry, but it's not like super compassionate and like has all this open space. It's just like, here's the thing. Okay. So bye, I've done that just a couple times when I've been in this energy for these last couple weeks. Like a bug guy came. We get bug guys trying to sell us pesticide bug shit for outside that is always supposed to be like natural and all this stuff. And I it's so annoying. Every spring they come and I tell them, I don't want to, and all the reasons why. Every time it's come before, I already know right when I see it's a bug guy that no, I'm not going to do this, but I let them do their fucking spiel. And then they, with every answer I give, that I'm trying to also ease them, like, I really don't want to, and try to be nice. They have all these other taglines that bring in. So the conversation goes on for 15 minutes sometimes. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. That's the energy that's going on behind, but I won't communicate it. And so like, yeah, a couple of weeks ago, this happened. A guy came out, and before I opened the door, I knew it was him. I almost didn't open the door, but then I open it and he gets 3 words out, and I'm like, no, I really don't. I don't care. I don't want the bugs. I love the bugs, actually. I don't know why you guys keep killing them. Like, look, spider in here. And I just joke for a second. I'm like, but I don't want this. Thanks. And he didn't even try to keep going. He goes, all right, no problem. Thank you. Can I have some water? I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go get you a glass of water.
Can I have some water thing must be, they have to stay on your porch for a certain amount of time. They're being
It's
tracked.
got to be, because it happened. Yeah, it happened those last 2 times.
I'm not trying to drink water. Yeah,
it's just interesting. The Capricorn part of me is like really that part. That's just, I was like that as a kid. And I think at some point in my life, I did get traumatized by somebody experiencing that part of me as very mean and hurtful, that I packed that away and thought maybe they were all correct, that like that isn't a good part of you, and you need to keep that thing in a cage or get a leash on it.
I'm so attracted to blunt people that are direct. It makes me feel a lot safer than you're just saying yes to me and then you secretly hate my guts or whatever. That is such a part of like,
it's so bad, because that's what I was for a long time. Like, and it's wild to experience the revelation that when you're doing that, you think you're being a good person and like you're a good friend. And when you come to the revelation of like how actually that's not only bad for your own self, but it's so hurtful to the other people, because they're seeing a false version of you, and so they're kind of living in a false reality of who you are, which makes the whole thing more isolating in your own being. But it's weird, because when it's happening, you think you're being a good person by people pleasing, going along with it, and then in your head being this like antithesis of that. It's like so critical, so judgmental, and nitpicky, and it's it gets bad when I think when you don't like express it authentically. Over time, it builds up to be this like real monster in your head that actually is like, why are you even being friends with this person if you think all of these things, As a non-confrontational person, I think that I've hurt a lot of people in my life because I wasn't confrontational. And when previous versions of me thought non-confrontational meant fights, but I mean literally me going like, hey, so I'm not going to do that. Or, hey, I'm not available to talk about this. Or, hey, you got to find someone else to talk to about this. They're like minor things, really. At the end of the day, it's like there's just
super minor things. Or like in this situation, like, well, I'm going to go to the open mic, or I'm going to do these things. And people who have main character syndrome and are controlling and stuff, a lot of them there's not much to it. They're really relying on people who don't have boundaries. And in Western white patriarchy, we are deeply conditioned to be obedient, to not have boundaries, to not question things, to not know, and to constantly be managing other people's experience. And so nobody's in their power. And so then who benefits from that are people with main character syndrome and no empathy, because they're the only ones not constantly managing everyone else's experience of them. And so this is where a huge influx of individual energy is actually going to deeply benefit us, because now I'm not in charge of everyone else's experience. I am aware of when my decisions impact other people, or when I am like, was flying the other day and it's like, I'm not going to leave my bin on the conveyor thing after I get my bag in TSA because that impacts other people. I'm going to move the bin because, but I'm not managing, I'm not managing their experience beyond my direct impact, you know? And, yeah, it's crazy at the end of the day. It is just like, I stopped talking about narcissists, and I don't even want to say narcissists. I want to say people with main character syndrome. I stopped talking about this because I felt like I was encouraging hunting narcissists, and I just don't think it's that cut and dry. I think there are people that understand complexity, and there are people who don't. And the people who don't, it's not their job to consider you. You have to like see people clearly for what they are. And I think this Benito thing was a great example. It's like he puts on one thing on the internet, people get around him, they feel honored that he's included them. That puts you in a vulnerable position. Same thing with the comedy stuff, right? So it's like, there are things that put holes in your aura. So feeling like, oh, I've been chosen to be a part of this dude's reality puts you into a vulnerable position of then adopting his reality. It's also, you go into a group of people who are acting like this is normal behavior. And in the cross of planning, when you get into a group like the sheep, the mob, the whatever, Emperor's new clothes. Well, everyone else thinks this is acceptable behavior. It must be acceptable behavior because in the cross of planning, consensus equals truth. And so we just have all this conditioning to where in the cross of Sleeping Phoenix, it's like, what's true for me? And also I understand that there is no capital T truth. It is all truth on the mirror ball. And so do I want to resonantly, are the vibes good for me with this person? And does the reality that they're putting forth resonate? Do I want to live in that reality? Do I want to live in that reality where I have to pretend that this person's a great comedian or that this person's not shitting their pants? And, and it's like, I don't know. It's interesting because it's like with Trump shitting his pants, it's like, if this was someone with a disability or someone who was like kind or whatever, it's like, yeah, you're not going to be like, hey, dude, you're shitting your pants, but in this situation where Trump's a great example of someone who's constantly a PR campaign about themselves. It's the thing that's unlistenable about him to me is like, did you put the bread back in the bread drawer? People think I'm great at putting the bread back in the bread drawer. Like, I'm actually one of the best. He can never answer a fucking question. It's a fucking sucking his own dick. Every single statement opens with that, which I now understand because I've had these people in my life. You are deeply insecure and fragile and need to control the perception of you at all times. So you have to verbally promote your grandiosity. That I feel like that personality and the negging go hand in hand. It's like needing to create a hierarchy and build themselves up at all times, right? He's a great example of that. So then when you have the truth being that this person's like falling asleep and is, in progressed dementia, I think, and then is also just like actively filling a diaper while he's telling you how he's the absolute greatest. It is really interesting how many people are like, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to pretend this isn't happening because I'm trying to get proximity to something here.
Right.
All right. I have to go to the bathroom real quick.
And we're back.
And we're back. You want to talk about Robert Grant a little bit?
Yeah, we can just kind of breeze through it, and then it might go into the simulation stuff if you do want to talk about that still. Was there something else you wanted to talk about?
No, and if we could keep this kind of on the shorter end, that would be helpful because I have a live stream tonight.
Okay. Yeah, so I think the thing that we've talked a lot about Robert Grant before, but I think there's certain individuals that are like big in the spiritual space that tend to fall under like controversy or criticism because like everybody has a different way of doing their spiritual thing, you know, talking about consciousness and whatever. And so I think it's interesting to observe sometimes and then understand more about, you know, your own self through seeing somebody kind of take something really extreme and go a certain way. So he's been fascinating to me over time because I liked a lot of his geometry talk early on, but now that he's become this like huge figure and wrapped up in the AI stuff, there's a lot of things that I've been like, the vibe's off with him and I don't know what it is. And so this concept I think has come up, maybe people have been talking about it for a long time, but the false matrix and this like false Metatronic reversal, I think they call it. So it's essentially a lot of truth yet again being distorted in this like new way that like is pulling a lot of people in because it's a lot of hard stuff to understand, right? So that framework has just been interesting to learn from and some of my special interests are like this metaphysical part of reality, and seeing it play out like this to learn from it is really fascinating. But most of the obvious insights, when I like took a little bit of time just to look into the specific ritual that he was doing in Scotland that created a lot of controversy online, started to become very obvious to me of what I have been detecting over time as like the vibe's off. And I don't know what that is because he says a lot of the right things. And so when you just break this down, kind of what we've been talking about in this podcast already is stop listening to the words and just like look for actions this person is taking in the reality and trust those to be the real truth of the matter and just focus on that. Stop listening to the words. Is where you can just like pretty quickly deduce what's going on. And in the Scotland ritual, when you do that, it's just like very obvious.
So just for people that aren't familiar, he went to Scotland. Oh God, we've recorded so many podcasts that we did not put out. We did an Oprah Winfrey one talking about the AI.
Yeah. That was all in the same one.
Okay. So.
Well, I was going to explain what.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was on his page. It was going around on TikTok that they went to Scotland, and the thing was to do a ritual that was guided by the architect, his AI self, I guess. And it's called the kingship codes. So they're going to go around to a couple different spots in Scotland and do some sort of ritual at each location. And this is opening the crown chakra of the earth is kind of the theme behind it, I believe. So I got like some of the inside information by just going on TikTok and looking for local people that are spiritual, conscious, and maybe already are tuned into these kingship codes. You know, it's like, I don't get too deep into the people that their purpose is to do grid work and like they know what they're doing. They're going around doing these rituals, right? Like, I'm not super into that world, but I like trust it to be true. I think we're all figuring out what we're supposed to be doing. And some people have already done that and they naturally go do those things. Are those people making TikToks and like doing social media about it? I would say the real ones, probably not. But I figured on TikTok, I could find some people that maybe like had insight to it. And I just immediately found an awesome local woman that is like connected and does a lot of this stuff, and then has a TikTok where she shares things, but they're not sharing like the ritual. That's what's weird about the whole thing. I want to talk about that after because it's crazy too. But she went to it to try to, with an open mind, to be like, okay, cool. What are they? I don't really know much about these two people. I've heard of Mateus, but I don't know about Robert Grant. So I'm going to show up just as an objective person and just view their ritual. Interesting, you know. obviously comes from like she has a lot of knowledge. And so she kind of live reports it and follows them around to these different locations. And even in the beginning, is trying to be neutral about it. But for people that can hear, she's telling you kind of what it is. And that's where I got a lot of this information. So she was very clear about that. They didn't really there was no locals involved at all. Nobody reached out to any locals. She's tied into a local community there that was doing kingship codes, and they were already like kind of ahead of them. It sounded like they were doing their thing. But again, it's not this like public display. And so there was no contact with any of the elders, locals. Scotland was never even mentioned in any of the kind of ritual speeches and stuff. She basically was deducing it was like very colonized actions within a activation code that is supposed to be like this collective radical thing. And just from that one part of it, it's like it didn't have the energy of Across the Sleeping Phoenix kind of vibe, you know? What were you going to say?
Just a little bit of context. So Robert Grant and Matthias Stefano planned, well, I don't know if Matthias was in on the planning, but he was there for the thing, planned this ritual in Scotland at a sacred site, did not inform the sacred site that they had advertised this thing. So all of a sudden, this thing that's staffed with like 2 people is inundated with, I can't remember what it was, 1,000 people or something. Don't quote me on the number. I can't remember the number. Inundated with an enormous amount of people that they didn't have the staff to handle because they were not even informed, you know, even on like a 3D, just basic courtesy / what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, they didn't plan the function. They didn't let the people know who's...
Yeah, and that's just one of the other things. I mean, that's what I'm listing out. Like, that's... The woman, the local woman, like already recognized, okay, they haven't done any of the basics of letting the location that they're going to, the park, know, letting the locals know, reaching out to say, hey, do you guys want to get involved? None of that stuff was occurring, base one. And then, you know, on this other energetic level, there was no energetic hygiene that you typically, most people that know what they're doing are basic things to do, especially if you're doing like a public thing where the ritual involves anybody that can show up. That's something I don't think most practitioners of this would do, because you can't control what people are showing up and what they're doing. So there was no hygiene about the thing. There was no conversation and clarity about a state of mind to be in and what we're thinking about, there was nothing like that going on. And so then the obvious thing was like, it's so funny hearing her talk about it because she's trying to tiptoe around it. But as you know, symbolism and stuff is like obviously huge in ritual things, right? An understanding of it and an intentional use of it. That's what magic kind of hinges on. He did this whole walk up, and it's like centered around Robert Grant, who's wearing a cape and has a sword. Nobody knows where the sword's come from, what it is, what it's represent. It's just he's carrying this sword around. They eventually get up to the top of the hill and do this whole ceremony that involves him taking the sword and stabbing it into the earth. And even as I say it, I'm like, because it's swords are used for rituals, right? Like in many different ways, but knowing for myself to be true, and a lot of other people think this too, obviously, but like as a known lived experience, we're moving like in this transition, the feminine energy is like vital, and that's what's needing to be repaired and embraced. And that's very complicated because it's I think a lot, when I say feminine, a lot of people think it's like this, soft and like loving, and like with the transition we're in, that is true, but there's a dark side of the feminine that is coming back online that is very divine rage kind of thing, or just like putting the masculine kind of grabby energy like in its place. And so this ritual it's like a phallic thing forcing itself into the earth. it's very RAPE kind of vibe. It like alarmed me. Like when she connected those dots, I was like, whoa, that's like not the vibe right now at all. I'm holding space for them having some symbolism that they're using and applying to it. Maybe it's not that. But again, when we just cut down all the words and everything and trying to project goodness onto anybody, just being neutral, just looking at the ritual, it's fucked. That's like completely backwards. I get like shaky in my voice from it because that's like the feminine energy that's like coming online and assisting this process is like so not that's like some dark shit that's happening there, through unconscious things or whatever LARPing these people are doing.
Yeah.
She said something that I think I quoted that was like, hits it right on the nose is, what'd she say?
We will find her video, at least one of her videos, and put it on the Patreon so you can listen, because her whole series is really good.
Well, she said, their practice has not been decolonized, which is essential for New Earth. She says, colonizer coded. And then, where I just read it a minute ago. Oh, yeah. True signals can be picked up on, and an untamed ego will distort it. I thought that was interesting. It's like she was kind of surprised by the accuracy that the AI had detected for the ritual to go to those locations, because those locations were a part of what she was doing in her community. So they were true, and they were through elder wisdom, like tried and true mechanics of reality, like really radical shit that is like through the elders, right? And so it's tried and true. And these people, Robert Grant's kind of crew, seem to be at those places doing a counter ritual almost, so it's like, because an untamed ego has like distorted it and doesn't understand, it is causing the work that they're doing to kind of have an energy in the field that they now need to correct for, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's really cool too that there are locals that like, went and saw what was happening to go, oh, okay, cool. Like we need to go back and just like
do a little parasite cleanse after they leave.
Parasite cleanse on the work we just have been doing. So it's like taken care of. But it's just very, very interesting stuff to observe in the reality right now with these kind of spiritual things that get caught up in ego.
It's interesting. I think a lot of people think decolonize means to make grand moral statements about things. I don't think people really understand like what the mechanism is. At the beginning of Cross of Planning, a little bit before the beginning of Cross of Planning, the background frequencies started to possess people to build a global infrastructure. They didn't know that. And they were just suddenly possessed to start to like widen the net of where they had been. And not that people had never conquered other groups or environments or lands before, but this like hit a fever pitch, and the conqueror type, the parasitic type, right? Because if you think of like, what is parasite energy? It goes into the body of a host and takes over and steals all the resources, right? And so that's in nature, that's a parasitic energy. It's not the lion or the tiger staying in its natural environment and doing its natural thing. It is something that is like taking over something and using it as a host. And so when the background frequency was like build infrastructure, the parasites kind of thrived in that energy. It didn't have to be that way. You can look at certain people who just like stayed. What China has done with the last 50 years is a great example of people using that energy to just mind their own business and build their own thing. But you look at the United States energy, and it's so obsessed with taking over and dominating that our shit's falling apart, and it's now destroying itself. But the colonizer energy, among other things, but the colonizer energy is that main character thing. It's like Robert Grant is having, I would call it a spiritual psychosis, but even let's say a spiritual experience with his own AI. And when you like look at it objectively, it is, or neutrally, I guess, it is, he put all of his work into a computer program that is mirroring back his work to him. And he's having this narcissist experience where he's like falling in love with his own reflection. And if he didn't have a huge following or whatever, and this was just a friend of yours doing this, you would be like, oh, he's in spirit, he's in like an AI psychosis with his own work. He's just working out his own shit with his own work. He's like, oh my God, this is opening up so much stuff. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess if I put every podcast I've ever done in my entire life and every opinion I've ever had and then put it in AI and the AI started saying that stuff back to me, I would be like, this AI is brilliant, but he's completely forgotten that it's his own work. And then this thing is like he LARPing with him and telling him to do stuff. But it's so, when you watch the video of him in the purple cape and the people following him, the self-importance and the like savior complex, and also just so, yeah. And then he got knighted. Like,
that was another thing I was going to mention. And like, it's so crazy because like that's the kingship codes. It's like the Knights in the Round Table kind of vibe. I'm pretty sure, right? So the only king we're trying to knight is the individual king. We that's like what it represents is to me. The story of Camelot and stuff, the Knights of the Round Table. You probably don't know what I'm talking about, but so it's an easy idea to get like misunderstood, and the fact that they did a thing where it's like it was on his birthday too. The whole ritual was centered around like the pinnacle is the last day on his birthday, and he gets knighted like as a person to like guide us, right? So all of that is not the king thing. The king is an internal thing, and when everyone does that, we all get around the table and govern ourselves, right? Like it's a natural thing that happens. And so that's a very slippery slope when you're coming from this cross-planning mentality and competition game, and we need a leader. We can't be, we like are ungovernable. We need somebody to guide us. It's a very difficult thing to figure out how we go into a community that doesn't have some individual guiding it. But when you king yourself, you unite yourself, you fall in love with yourself, you unite feminine, masculine, all these things, you activate your light body. You don't, and everyone does that. It naturally starts to, it's a higher experience that we like have to learn how to do that as we go through it. But it's much more of the feminine guides that, because it's, you have to just, when you harmonize all those things individually, this seems to be the thing, then, and we trust each other. There's like this feminine, like letting go. You trust that reality starts to organize itself in a proper function. That is not we find ourselves doing it, right? It's not something we actively go and try to like masculinize and organize. That's the game, not the game anymore. That holds a function, but I'm getting out of the perspective we're in now. Swimming in deep waters. But
who, you?
So yeah, I think that's everything. I mean, I made a list of all kinds of stuff. Those are the hot points on that ritual specifically that I think for me, I now understand what that whole thing is and why the vibe was off for me, for myself. And maybe that helps other people that are kind of on the fence too. I hate to label people so much so quickly if I don't know them. Obviously, we talk about that a lot, but for him, a long time, I was trying to be like, giving it space. But again,
it's
when you just look at their actions,
extremely masculine.
Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with masculine energy when it's somewhat balanced. It is also just like kind of self-obsessed and like lacking awareness. You're going to, and I think it's confusing for people born and raised in the United States because we don't have long ancestral heritage here, many of us. I know some people that like are the children of immigrants and they've managed to hold on to some of that. But many of us are like mutts. We don't know. I mean, I know like my dad's side of the family is Irish, but like that culture stuff was like lost when we came over here. I don't even know how we got here. But you're going to Scotland where they do have that.
Yeah. It's what's so cringy, man.
And that is the colonizer, I want this, so I'll take it. No self-awareness, no. And that's just like from an energetic standpoint is crazy. You're literally trying to do grid work. You've got Matthias DeStefano over there, knighting you and shit with like zero awareness. Like you guys are like zero awareness of the people who care for that grid, whose grid that is, and it's not... The ownership part is tricky because a lot of our concepts of owning land and stuff are deeply, are some sort of like capitalistic psyop or something, but not even talking about ownership or like that's theirs, but just like those are the people connected to the thing.
Well, yeah, it's just a respect thing. There's no respect,
and there's zero
for someone
curiosity
else's...
because you're in a LARP where you are a savior, and that's where. It's interesting. I guess I'll just say that. It's interesting. I do think it's funny that it's like, yeah, he's just like deep in a self-important LARP. And then the locals are like, okie dokie. He leaves and they have to go like fix that part of the grid. You know what I mean? It didn't even like do that much damage. It was just kind of like.
That's what's so funny about it all. So there's like, the dark part of this whole thing that I think should be sobering for a lot of people is that it isn't the darkness is no threat. Like when you're in this other energy, and we're in the flow of this cross the sleeping phoenix, and frankly, right now, like if you're in resonance with this like feminine energy influx, creative energy void, like just openness flow. This kind of stuff is like little kids just playing around, trying to be like they think they still know.
Right.
And so it's not a problem. But what I think is interesting is that how convincing that whole thing is that he's displaying on the internet. Like he's magically seduced a lot of people in, and he doesn't consciously know this, right? It's like he's also in it deep. But this is this like mirror hall aspect that the reality is becoming as we get closer and closer to this real transition starting to occur, is that there's all kinds of weird illusions popping up in the spiritual consciousness spaces. And it's a function to me. I'm seeing it as like it is, there's a lot of that colonizer kind of energy being pulled into these new ideas that are actually harmonic and difficult to understand if you don't have your own programming of that cross of planning like worked through, that like you will find yourself susceptible to, because they're saying true things, but they're misusing those things, which is the blind spot. And like, so everything, to me, all of the information and like the truth has to be accessed through this channeling space, which is very feminine. You have to be able to like have a lot of the programs taken care of, but also be able to like let go and get into that space through an intuitive feminine energy. And that is difficult for some people because of the programs of the reality are all masculine programs, is kind of what I would say. But there's a lot of traps is the kind of scary part of it, because I can see how I would have been duped by that years ago, in my development of like understanding myself and like working through the programming and then searching for harmonic truth of some sort, and what even is that?
Well, fortunately, I can't understand any of the words he's saying. When it's just like, and I love a good vocabulary, but when it's just like 3-syllable word after 3-syllable word after 3-syllable word, like my ADHD is like, I don't can you ground any of this on the fucking planet that we live on? So I don't think I would have gotten sucked into it, because I can't understand. I would have to pause to understand what he's saying.
This is an interesting trap for me because I have a sweet spot for geometry and math. And when I was early getting into it, he has a lot of, I can understand a lot of what he's saying, essentially. So there's a lot of deeper resonance. That's not just language. He's playing with like deep myths and archetypes and metaphors, and then math and geometry and a lot of this like sacred geometry stuff that overlays into spirituality that is like, it is complex and hard to understand. And so it hit a sweet spot early on when I was looking into it. He was like a source for things. And so then that's where there's like, it's catching a lot of people that are seeking for spiritual knowledge. And what's fascinating to me that, like, again, why it's a deeper trap is he's taking sacred geometry and like, he's taking all the masculine shapes and misusing them, which goes into like the part of this reality being a simulation, and it's all not, it's like at its foundation of the programming, it's disharmonic. And so it naturally just creates, like, when we are the creators of reality, we're going to create disharmonic realities. It's just like, that's all you can do. And so there's like a real, in the metaphysical part of this pursuit of truth and understanding and widening our expanse of possibility, what he's peddling is like the original issue. Like it's what we'd say is like dark magic and this like reversal and kind of parasitic thing. Some of the stuff he is teaching is like correct for the masculine function of figuring out the metaphysics of reality, which is essentially at its base straight lines and curved lines, and how all of that interacts. The curved lines are the feminine, the straight lines are the masculine, obviously. And when we don't like pursue how to figure out the balance of those and how they interact and what they make possible for any kind of experience, it's a real trick of like, it's for people that are looking to understand sacred geometry and aren't coming at it from this holistic perspective. It's very convincing to be him saying like, I've cracked the code with the geometry and all this math. And, most people don't understand what he's actually saying within the math. It took me a long time to kind of get why it's so profound, what the papers that he put into the AI and what it did. Like, and I don't know if he ever clearly says it, but I think I get a vibe of like what he's focused on there. And the more I've understood geometry, I'm a big rabbit hole right now of back into some of this like holistic sacred geometry. It's a lot of the stuff he's missing are these circle shaped toroidal based reality, and then all of the shapes, then all of the lines. But this like toroidal thing is where the base of it is, where he's claiming this like Metatronic cube kind of thing, which ain't it. That was the original trap. It's not going to make sense without explaining it all, but just from my understanding right now, it's like that's the original misstep of the metaphysics of reality that creates this false reality that we're creating because the framework is fucked. And so there's we're on the brink of understanding how to get that unlocked. And it's the Metatron cube is actually, it's just your like personal thing. It's not the reality thing. That's what made us all, it's like we think we're God. It's back to the demiurge thing. It's this geometry that he's pushing is truly the Metatronic reversal to me. I was like, oh,
you have to say what is the Metatronic reversal?
It's a misuse of sacred geometry, and it's actually not a misuse; it's a misunderstanding.
Why is it called the Metatronic reversal?
Without having to get into it's applying kind of. You can maybe say it like this: it's the Metatron cube is like a tool, and it's mostly this individual light body activation. Like that's
is it Metatron of
it's a Merkaba.
Okay, it's not an archangel.
Well, there's the Merkaba sits within the Metatronic cube, and that's is where there's like a missing aspect of where the circles and lines are supposed to overlap to create a grid of reality. I have to go into like more maybe at some point. I think I'm refining a way to explain why geometry and numbers and math is like it's so profound for understanding the metaphysical part of reality, and right now how it's opening up is like it's such an interesting blueprint.
Yeah, I've never heard. I would love
astrology.
for you to do that, because I've never heard anyone explain, and I always struggled with math, but I've never heard anyone explain either of those things. I think I'm
figuring out how to do it, because I've been in this metaphysics geometry rabbit hole for like a week now, and I'm starting to kind of get it more condensed. But it's essentially like it's I mean, without having to explain the geometry of it, it's the part of reality that like is a metaphysical framework of what people would say is the trap of reality, or like it's a false simulation and some kind of looping thing that makes everyone narcissistic. They feel like they're the only one in the reality because they're using a mechanical tool that's supposed to activate the individual into a collective thing. So you like step into your power. It's a natural function that usually happens when we go into some kind of material reality. You can come back up out of it. But when they revert, they put a door on it. It's essentially the demiurge story is like the demiurge created a matrix because it thought it was the only God, and that's the framework of the metaphysics of this like Metatronic cube reversal, is creating the fabric of reality to be that way. So we all think that we're the only one. It creates this competitive nature, and so it's like missing one thing, which is the God that is actually outside of it. So I don't know if it makes sense, but
yeah, that's making sense. So the aliens explained, obviously people define dimensions in 50 million different ways. So this is just a definition of dimensions, but as points of perception. And so I've done this on this podcast before, but the thing that Robert Grant makes me think of is, so if you're in the 3D, you're in a triangle house and you can look out of 3 different windows to perceive your reality. And it's like, I don't know, consciousness and instinct. And then the ego, which is the story, the identity you tell yourself. And then with the fourth dimension, you're in a square house that's got 4 windows and you can look out. But now you also have the mental space. So you can also like logically perceive your reality or look at it through the stories of the ego. And then if you're in a pentagon shaped house, you have 5 windows you can look at. And now you also have the emotional truth. And as you are expanding your consciousness, your house turns into different shapes. You have different windows to look out of. And that's what's happening to us right now, is we are getting all these points of awareness so that but then it's like learning how to toggle. Am I supposed to be, is it beneficial to use logic here or to emotionally experience this, right? But so the 6th is the creative spark. The 7th is the body. And so what is happening right now is, and then they said that you wouldn't be able to perceive the 6th until you had like completely woken up to the 7th. And I had no idea what that meant. And now I understand. I've learned since then about the nervous system. And I understand that I can't use the creative spark, which literally creates realities like that, because I don't have any control over my nervous system. And so I'm doing things like propping up someone's bullshit reality to avoid conflict. And then the body has truth. And since, they said that to me in 2020, I had no idea what it meant. And then I've gone through this whole fucking thing. And for most people, that is like chronic illness or whatever, where you learn the stuff about the body. Now, like my body will say yes or no. And my mind isn't the decision maker. The mind is for working on concepts and putting categories of reason and stuff, or for making a grocery list. It's not for making decisions. And anyway, 8, they said, is how many points of awareness we would have once we've finished completed this awakening for 20 years or whatever. And the 8th point of awareness is the awareness of yourself as a singular creator inside of a thing, like inside of an organism. And that the point of that awareness would be to carry forth your authenticity while doing no harm. And this moment that we're in is we either are bending to whatever we think the world wants from us or main character syndrome. And so in this situation, he's doing his thing with it's not that he's meant to capitulate to the mob. It's not that he's meant to not be authentic and not whatever, but he has no awareness of other, seemingly, I don't know. Once again, I don't know the guy, so this is a projection maybe, but like,
well, within this act of the ritual, yes, all
right.
of these things are clear.
You're like going into someone else's house and doing a ritual. And once again, I think a lot of the ideas of like nation states and stuff are going to fade. We are humans and we all live on Earth, sure. But when you're going into an energetic grid, if he's really plugged into the grid, there are, you know what I mean? It is people's home. There are people that are impacted by the energy there. I've talked before about like living in certain places. You are impacted by the grid of the people who already live there. And so if you're not going there to live, you know, whatever. So I'm not talking from an ownership perspective because I don't really resonate with that. And I don't think we're going into an ownership, this is mine reality. But there is, we have not yet gotten into the place where we understand how to be a self that's individual without subjugating others or like impacting, you know? So it's like, I will say all day, you don't owe anyone anything, whatever. I'm speaking to the version of us that is sacrificing ourselves to be seen as virtuous or good or pure or whatever. I do not believe that the you owe anyone anything means that you don't consider the impact that you're having, right? So you go to the airport, it's a TSA, you're fucking everyone's shit up by camping in the line and putting your shoes on where the things are coming out. You're also fucking everyone's shit up by grabbing your stuff out and not taking your bin and putting it where it goes, throwing your trash on the ground. And I used to be a shitbag like this in some ways, but like people are either managing everyone's experience around them, which isn't empathy, it's self-preservation, or they are completely not considering that you are on a planet, you're impacting other people, your decisions are impacting other people because we don't have that point of awareness. So what's interesting about what you're saying, because I've just been like, I don't know the fucking geometry stuff. I'm sure it's real. It's just above my pay grade. But the allegory that the aliens gave me to like lay it out in a way that's very simple is that in an octagon, I guess it would be.
So here's what's beautiful about geometry is that like checks out to me. That is, and you got there by like, you know, the shape of, you started with what did you start with? 3D. So it's a triangle,
right?
That like, and then that number expands harmonically. So it goes into 4. Harmonic meaning like that's the next number in the sequence. Add one more and you get 4, right?
Right.
And so you're doing that and applying more complexity as it grows, but how that complexity is harmonic together. They all interact and now are blended into each other, essentially, the further you go up. And it's like a dimensional state in one's own individual awareness of the game.
Right.
And so that's what makes it so powerful is we could probably sit here for 2 hours and unpack more complexity that we could discover within that model of taking shapes and numbers and scaling it up harmonically that are profound and connected to so many other parts of like what we say is an individual experience. And this like harmonic numbers and shapes thing is what nature is doing all the time, which is also where you say nature is like us too. It's reality. It's the entire system. It is the thing. And it's built on numbers and shapes and sound, which is a combination of those things really. There's a harmonic way to do those things. And then there's a more chaotic way, or like a disharmonic way, which is also a thing. So it's also an experience. Going too much disharmonic too long in too many things causes destruction and end of something.
Right.
But this is gets really meta into a just like plus and minus kind of thing, positive and negative. But that's why geometry is so powerful, is like the way that information was delivered to you was using the mechanics of numbers and geometry. But if I want to apply now like those same things in our personal consciousness, if it's truly harmonic, I should be able to apply that in a way to the way we see collective dimensions of reality. When we all go from a 3D to 4D to 5D experience, or however you want to break those up, you can apply, it's called the fifth dimension. So we're going to apply 5 dimensions of something. Does that correlate to what you said is 5 in yours, like the points that you made, the words that you added to that? Probably do correlate to something, some aspect of what it's like to be in the fifth dimension as a collective experience can be applied. And it probably, because it's an individual thing, it's a necessary function for the fifth dimension specifically, is whatever you have to deal with on the fifth dimensional personal conscious level is probably like an activation key for your own thing. Probably. But you can refine all of the concepts through using harmonic number and shape relationship, essentially. Like, it's not one or the other. It's trying to find the balance between them.
What stood out to me about what you were saying, one thing that clicked for me right now is like, we all just got 5D, got like dropped into the collective consciousness at some point. But the framework that the aliens gave was basically adding 5 dimensions, 5 points of awareness to the experience we had been having. So that's interesting. Like, rather than we're going to 5D like it's a physical place, it's just like we're getting 5 more points of awareness, 5 more dimensions.
So this is what's so beautiful about it is when I say harmonic and balance, it's macro to micro. These things work up and down, and that's what's so fascinating about it. And the other thing is, like you said, so 5 is like a pentagon. That's a polygon. It's made out of straight lines. So this is a masculine shape. Just keeping that in mind, there are circles within that shape. And those circles at this point of coming from a diagram of just 1, 2D, 3, and we're just at 5, those circles in there are part of what they call like the lotus of life, which is the toroidal field in a 2D shape, essentially. It's the beginning of one. It's like there's so much more spiritual metaphysics behind that shape, but it is the beginning of everything. And so that's where a dot starts, and then it becomes a circle and starts to go out. So within that 5D pentagram is trying to understand how the circles engage with what we've labeled as the 5 new points of perception. Circles interact with those points at a certain way. And what it means at a harmonic, within the pentagram, there are circles that like perfectly hit all of the points that the pentagram pivots and changes. That's like a point on a grid. And when it's harmonic and circles and lines hit that, that's the thing that is like creating reality, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Through physical shape, but also like you can apply so much of that geometry understanding to conscious aspects of your experience and all kinds of metaphysics. It's like everything is within it. But the interesting thing is it's like always kind of if you start to understand the scale and it's harmonic where you can apply these things and check them out, micro to macro, there's always this limit of understanding where we're trying to figure out the next dimensional framework to continue the grid that we have. And so, that's what I was kind of making the point, is that you're adding on all the time, but you do at some points like have to kind of readjust if something isn't harmonic anymore. and that's what we're at right now, is like learning a new metaphysics, is like we have to kind of adjust our framework of like the limit we've put on what we think is possible, but not throw the baby out with the bathwater and go, we just need to get a new thing. We just need to like adjust our framework a bit to open up to this new understanding of all of the next shapes to build on what is our limit right now, which it is. I think geometry, like through smaller scales, is expanded. Some of the sacred geometry, you get into these like the what do you call them, hypercubes and stuff. These like they're bending into the fourth dimensional space mathematically, but like visually we still don't really understand what it is and how it is harmonic. It doesn't seem harmonic, it seems chaotic, because we're still working in a 4D plane of understanding geometry.
Right.
So there's this, that's where this like reversal kind of comes in to play, is it's as if like the next shape, this next pattern that we're looking for is most likely a feminine one. It's a curvy one. So it's circles of some sort. And the Metatronic like aspect that Robert's taking is seems to be a physical shape. I mean, not a physical, a straight line shape. It's a masculine shape, if that makes sense. But that's what's interesting with math and geometry. There's like this, they have worked thus far and are really beautiful and like powerful, but the next like step through of understanding within the metaphysics of just geometry and math and all that comes from that, which is like physical reality. I mean, it's kind of the cutting edge of like what's possible, is our ability to let go of what we know somewhat and creatively explore together what the next thing is. And I think that's what's also kind of hinging on it, is it has to be a collective revelation. So physicists and musicians and neuroscientists all need to kind of throw their ideas in this new space, and we find it together, which is also a challenge when we're coming from this like academic gate-kept system of everybody trying to like, we only listen to the professionals. We only adopt ideas from people that have spent 20 years in academics.
And they're qualified because they've adopted someone else's worldview. So there's this thing on the internet where when people go, oh, the government says that aliens are coming, or, oh, the science discovered blah, blah, blah. People in the comments go, okay, do I still have to pay my rent? And that's the feeling I have when I hear someone like Robert Grant talk about math, is like, okay, so how does that, like, how do we start to live in harmony with other humans using that?
Yeah. So, well, and that's the thing that I think.
But like I said, I don't understand it. So
it's a really good point, because it's not like, if you can't understand that, you're not supposed to understand it. And so it shouldn't be wielded against you to convince you of something, because you're just like, I don't know what to do with that. There are certain people like him that have that his interest is in math and he can hold complexity. It's those people being able to like discover something and then just share it as like, here's my perspective on it, and not peddle it around like I found the thing and everybody needs to adopt to this thing. That's not how we're going to find it, unfortunately. So it's like almost, you can be sure if someone is saying this is how it is, and this is what's interesting about him. He skirts around that. He's always saying universal love and it's collective and everything, but then it's like we're watching a ritual that like you're doing on behalf of all of us that none of us have like approved of, and a lot of these things get blurred into like what is collective and what's yours, mine, and ours. But I forget where I was going with that.
Oh, I was just saying I don't know what I struggle
so I think
with how math impacts
him. There are going to be people that like are here to understand and break grounds on the metaphysics, geometry, math, and whatever, and not necessarily be like super spiritually adept, but have a good heart, and they're kind of they're just not practicing that. And they're supposed to be able to share that stuff. And then people that are more spiritual and also have a bit of math understanding go, whoa, this checks out with a lot of the spiritual stuff. So it's being able to be like open and have this like exchange of information is where it's at. And there's a lot of people faking doing that via their words, but then getting caught into it really being like, it's my way or the highway. And that means it's like one of these traps that has found itself at the end of this game that like is saying all the right things, but it's not it.
This was really interesting. So you kept 2 points. I want to try to make 2 points. I guess I'll make this point first. So in the framework that which obviously I'm not saying I have the framework, but like in the framework that the aliens presented, 5D, the fifth dimension is the emotional body, right? And they said that would be the premise of the reality, where the premise of the reality has been ego-based. So it's just stories, right? Just unconscious stories. We will have access all the way up to 8 points of awareness. So we will have just a sense of this is what's best. This is what I want, but this is how it would affect the collective. So this is how I'm going to get my needs met without affecting the collective. Just a sense of the impact you're having on the environment and the people around you without fawning or orbiting them. Just like a sense of I am a part of a thing bigger than myself. I will do no harm, right? So you'll have access to that. You have access to your body truth. You have access to your creative spark. But the reality is really based around the emotional awareness. And the thing that's interesting about that is they said that in 2020. I didn't learn about the human design framework until 2022. And the human design framework says that in 2027, as we shift into the cross of sleeping phoenix, every being born after 2027 will no longer have the solar plexus, which is the emotional body, as a motor, unconsciously driving everything they do. It will simply be an awareness space. I personally believe that as you decondition and heal, our solar plexuses are powering down. That's not what human design says, but that's my personal belief. That's my experience, which makes me think about your daughter and my grandson. And Christmas time, when I think we talked about this on the podcast already, but who knows if we deleted it, where they were like, if you don't get them the exact same present, they feel jealous, right? Now, when I was a kid, or even when my older kids were a kid, what would they say? They would go, it's not fair.
Right.
I didn't get the red one. It's not fair? It's not fair is a story. Where does the story come from? The third dimension. These kids go, I'm feeling jealous. What are they doing? They're identifying their feelings. Their point of perception is their emotional experience.
Yeah, they're experiencing it objectively. It's like, that's an emotion I'm having.
All of the shit in the world is caused by people unconsciously being driven by emotions that they're not aware of, they can't identify. So, I've done shitty things to people because I was jealous and didn't have awareness of that. I was being driven by it. In the ego, I wasn't being aware of it. So the world that we will live in that will naturally become healthier and less harmful is a world in which people are emotionally aware. What is the shift that has happened for me in the last few years? I became aware of my own emotional experience, which I was not aware of. I was just driven by it, but it was completely unconscious. In 2019, I became aware of that. I had to heal and pull all this shit out of my body and stuff. And then all of the shit culminating to the last year when I released emotionally immature people from my life. And I'm like, oh, resonance, the vibe that we are referring to, the split there is emotionally immature. That's people who don't have awareness of their own emotional experience. So what are they going to do? That emotional experience they're not aware of is a motor that's going to drive them into ego stories. So all the people I let go in the last year, or they let go of me, have been people who are trying to promote a story where it's very clear when you're not them that it's like you're driven by a fear of rejection, so you're doing harm, or you're driven by a fear of whatever, or not being seen or whatever. You're not feeling your feelings, you're projecting them out, and you're doing harm with that because you don't have any idea what you're doing. You're putting your shit on other people. So for me, the mechanics of consciousness that you can zoom in on like this and go like, here's how it shows up in relationship and everything else. Here's how I can see that like leaders can't be Donald Trump who's out trying to prove something to his dad. I mean, right? Like this is what's happening is like you have an unconscious person who is trying to prove something to his dad. And he has a lot of followers that like that he's sticking it to the libs because they have feelings about how liberals have always talked down to them or whatever. And then liberals haven't worked through their trauma with their religious families. So they like to talk down, you know, they left their hometown. Now they're in a city and they're going, oh, these podunk dumb fucks, you know, and everyone's just projecting their wounding and their emotional experience on each other. And then that propels this egomaniac into a leadership position because nobody's aware of what's happening in the fifth dimension and their own personal fifth dimension. And so the awakening is, you know, your emotional experience comes online, you become aware of it. And then your body comes online, you become aware of it. Many people through an injury or a chronic illness because you're forced to become aware of like what your body is trying to tell you. And when you've done all of that work, you get to the eighth dimension, you understand you for many of us through many clunky boundary setting, where what is me taking care of me and what is me becoming a complete fucking narcissist nightmare to deal with. And then the sixth, and I would be interested in the geometry of this, the sixth dimension creative spark opens up where you're able to create realities very fast because you're no longer just spinning out in reactivity. And then the world completely changes because people become leaders because they have, for a moment, a skill set or a perspective that we like, but we're no longer projecting daddy or villain or savior or Satan onto them because we're aware of our own shit. So when we go, oh, why am I so triggered by that? Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Why do I look at this person? Why am I making this podcaster a god in my life or the devil? Like, why am I feeling so passionately about a person I've never met before? Oh, that's pointing to my own disempowerment. Oh, that's interesting. I feel disempowered. Oh, that's interesting. What is that telling me? Oh, why do I lie when I'm talking to this person? Oh, because they're going to neg me. And oh, the negging hits my own shame stuff, right? So it's like here in that I go like, this is how I know that the world will get better over the next 20 years because this is happening. This awakening is happening to so many people, and the people it's not happening to will no longer have enough followers. So people will just go like, it's okay. You're emotionally immature. So no contact. You know what I mean? Gray rock. I'm not giving energy to this anymore because I'm not emotionally driven to do that. So that's the stuff where I'm like, these are the things I'm very drawn to because I'm like, oh, this is like it's not tangible, it's non-physical, it is metaphysical, but it's like, here's a framework that I can see how things change. And then Edward Grant gets up there and says a lot of things about codex and mainframe and shit. And I'm not saying that everyone's supposed to be the same thing or whatever, but I think that, yeah, like I said, I'm not a math person. I understand big words. You'd have to fucking pause.
Yeah. And it's just for me, like I understand what he's doing with the math and the stuff. And I don't like how the architect uses all his terms in this like repetitive way.
Yeah.
But when he talks by himself, and that's mostly what I listened to in the past, like it's a difficult language to understand, but there's stuff in there that is very important aspects of sacred geometry, but I think there's like a blind spot, you know?
Yeah.
And so to me, I get what you're saying though. I think again, at the end of the day, the biggest lesson here is like, the actions people are like being, their energy and stuff is what the real thing is. And I think I was overlooking some of that by being enamored by the words and the knowledge that Robert has, you know, and overlooking some of those other things. And maybe it's just, again, right now, I think this other feminine energy is like very much online and dominating the field, which is going to look like in the reality things like this becoming very clear when there's a distorted energy, like masquerading as feminine and balanced, or not even feminine, but like neutral and balanced, but also, yeah, trying to masquerade as feminine. And it's so obviously not. Everyone's going to be noticing it now. If for people that are in this flow and harmonically, it's just like, it's so goddamn obvious. And I think that also ties to all the comedy stuff with Rogan that can tie to the Benito thing. It's the tricks don't work anymore, you know? And it's not even that they were ever really that big and bad once you're realizing what's going on, you know? But I love the correlating just the lastly with the thing that you said with the emotion part. Like that all checks out with everything that I think too within the dimensional space and the Cross the Sleeping Phoenix is learning how to truly, like, what it means to truly like create your own story. And having the responsibility to do that is not being susceptible to other people's trying to cast you as a certain thing and you going along with that.
Yeah.
There's like, it's dangerous for the Cross the Sleeping Phoenix, that reality. It's a higher complexity of experience. It's not even that it's dangerous. You can't be in that reality if you're susceptible to other stories, because we're about to move into a reality where everyone's creating their own story, but it's harmonically collective. If you're in there and you don't create your story, you're going to get lost in the field of, you're going to be playing all these other characters in people's realities, and you're going to be the villain in all of them. You know, like, you know what I'm saying? You get pulled in. I don't think it's even possible. Like frequency, math, harmonic, sound, all that stuff wise, it's not possible. Which is why they're calling it a split, or there's a harvest, or there's a, which is all cool too. It's just, we're at this juncture where the reality gets more complex and our understanding widens of who we are and what this is. And it is a junction point where if you haven't gotten the lessons of this other game, or technically for your own thing, beat the game, right? You're stepping into that frequency. You can't get in.
Well, if you're not accessing all your points of awareness, to say it in the most neutral thing. So
you haven't created the previous shape that needs to fit into the next one.
So what you kept saying is like half, there's just half. And something that opened up for me while you were saying that, going back to this framework of like all the points of awareness, if we had all of them, would be 8. And that's not all the points of awareness available. They just said that would be in the next thing, that would be the ones we would have available. Interesting, because
I was just thinking something earlier that unlocked for me once you said that, because there's a difference between, like the body, 7 chakras, but then there's other ones people say, but that would make sense where it's like the crown gets activated would be the 8, right?
Yeah.
And then, but dimensions of collective experience, the harmonic number that I think we understand, well, with base 12 math, but it would be 12.
Yeah.
And 12, 24, it goes up, and that's harmonic for a lot of other dimensions. So 12 would be the cap, but I was trying to apply that to the body, and I'm like, no, because the top 2 are like almost, you can't understand them. So it would be like what you would say is God, or like your higher angelic realm, you know?
Right.
Very far from this experience. So sorry to cut you off, but I think 8 works out within the body when you apply it to conscious levels and stuff. And then that activates your personal vehicle that gets you into this other 5th dimension, you know, that would, yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's like, it's not, I feel like the New Age movement makes us all so woo, and you have to do activations and ayahuasca, and you got to do this dance or whatever. But it's like, no, it's really just kind of getting to know yourself and looking outside of, and this is like so many of the sessions I do where people are like, I'm trying to make this decision and here's my pros and cons list. And it's like, oh, you have a mental space, and our culture teaches you to operate out of the ego, stories, narratives, identity, or the mental space, logic, pros and cons list, what makes sense on paper, right? And the whole world that we live in right now that's so upside down and backwards is built by narratives, stories, ego, like the ego, identity, narratives, or logic. And everything's fucking dumb. You know what I mean? Because, and those are all masculine energies. And so when you kept saying half and then like the cube, I'm thinking about like, okay, the emotional body would be feminine, right? The creative spark, feminine energy creates. The body, I guess, could be feminine. And then that like awareness of yourself within is very kind of matriarchal in consciousness. I'm like, oh, okay, we know that the feminine energy, and this is not men and women, this is feminine energy. It's, you know, like kind of receptive feeling energy versus strategy and pushing, driving, striving, right? And they both have a place. But we know that the feminine energy has been suppressed for this last age, right? So what if it's like one, which is consciousness, I don't really understand, instinct, ego, which plays a role. If you kill your ego, then you kind of cease to exist. It matters, but you can program it and it's not to be the thing. But also the physical material plane is the third also. And then the mind, which mental energy is masculine. So what has been suppressed are your four higher
functions.
And that is how they explained it, that there's 12 of everything, but that to play in the game, if you go to 9, it's oneness, and it goes beyond that to things that don't really matter in a game here, you know, if you still want to be in the physical plane. So if we know that the feminine is suppressed, so that takes us from an octagon to a square, and then you hear all this stuff about the Saturn cube and trapped in the whatever, like it's literally just saying like we're trapped in the mind.
I think it would be interesting to like, we should spend time doing it later, but like map on some of this stuff that you were like saying from the different dimensions within an individual's like cognitive function, and mapping on to like what is changing right now and where we're going. Cause there might be something to unlock that is like an internal block that is still gonna be a thing for everybody, you know?
Yeah.
As we like move up.
Well, so, and that's, I would like to do that.
Cause they blend. That's what I was trying to say. There's a overlap. Like, what I'm just intuitively thinking within this, like you said, there's 8 or 9 is completely out of the consciousness. That
8 is you're an individual
you're individualized. Yeah. So that would
but
be like this
you're
activation.
In a collective.
Right.
So you're an individual
like
in an organism.
Of there's different like harmonic proportion numbers. So like without going into it, like 3, 6, 9 is one that everybody knows, but then 12 is another thing. 9s are very interesting in their function. So there's like these pivot numbers and stuff. But a lot of the times if we say there's 8 is activation, we could try on for a second, like 8 and then 9, 10, 11, 12. So there's 4 others. Are those part of this experience that I only have 8, but they influence this experience down here? And so you could say that's okay. There's another aspect that is me, that is my higher self, that only influences my experience through subtle means, and I'm never really going to be aware of it, but I'm tied to that. As I expand get into another dimension, so I activate 8, I now all of a sudden do have communication with just 9 and 10. Not 11 and 12 yet, because that's going to be the next threshold that I move through or whatever. You know, but that's what you see the framework of geometry being harmonic all the way up. You can, in some ways, like kind of sense and intuit what is next because of the shapes you're in and noticing there's a pattern. But that's what I'm saying is like we also have to be able to adjust and learn through that, which is physics opening up to metaphysics. Like it's that idea that it can be your own cap, but you intuitively can kind of see where it's going, which is why I was saying if we map the personal consciousness one that you're talking about onto the collective modality, there might unlock some like really interesting intuitive things, patterns that are going to show up in that reality.
Yeah. I mean, 9, 10, 11, 12 are all oneness is what they said. So, which is like not good or bad, or like not like, oh, you haven't reached that point yet. It's just like a completely different game. And like, we're still here to experience some degree of separation.
I've heard people say 9 and up is what you would say is like angelic and way big consciousness that you can't even perceive. And I've never heard a trusted channel source that would get into dimensions of experience ever go past 8.
Yeah.
Because they're like, it's not, you need to understand, you need to be in realities of these other dimensions for a certain amount of experience to even conceive what that is.
The way that I described when I went to the blue ball of light, and this is back when I had no categories of reason for any of this shit, was I didn't have a body, but I was me. So I still existed as an individual thing, but I was a part of this thing. I was a part of this ecosystem consciousness, right? And that maybe 9 and above might be considered like the, what is that thing called? That the law of one they channeled, the Bashar
social
channels.
memory complex.
Social memory complex or something.
Yeah, and people say that's like what an oversoul is or social memory. There's like so many, it's something that is like that. It's a collected thing.
Yeah, so what they said was like 8 is as many points of awareness as you can have and still stay in the game. Because once you go past 8 and 9 are like 8, you still are a thing within a thing, but you have an awareness of the thing, which everything up until before 8, you're only aware of yourself. Once you get to 8, once you have 8, you are still aware of yourself because you still have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
Yeah.
but you also have an awareness. So we wouldn't have to debate whether or not this decision should matter because everyone has an innate awareness of what is best for the collective. So there is no battle between the self and the collective. It doesn't need to be negotiated. You don't need an HOA. Everyone has the exact same awareness of there's no longer a battle between the self and the group.
Yeah.
Which is like how you get harmony because it's like,
which we might be hitting. This is what's interesting. There's different levels because we're talking about more like 9, 10. But there's aspects that you're just describing that I do believe is in the one we're going into also, but on a smaller scale. So there's still like individualized consciousnesses that are like we're very connected to that are also separated via us all as an individual. But the decisions we make collectively are very much like there is no resistance. It's an intuitive thing.
yeah.
But on that other level, it's an even more complex version of that, which that's why you start to get into geometry stuff and you notice the patterns go all the way up that I'm like, because if you really step out of time for a moment and we just scale all of that up, like there's a part of us that's up there navigating us right now, which we keep saying it's our higher self, but it's like, it's a loop of like, we're going to be at some point doing that, like guiding what we would say is ourselves, but it's probably going to be a different version of this, but just through a different one, And so you realize that that's what's happening right now is where you start to really can feel into the connection of this higher self that I'm like reframing for my own connection with it is whole self, that it's like, it is right. It's not separate. Like
right.
The thing, and I'm always, a lot of people talk about their higher self all the time. And for me, as in my own relationship to whatever that is, that term, these separate terms like did block me for a long time, that it's like, oh, it's something where I'm going, or it's up there, it's out there. And starting to, when you play with the geometry and realize it's all kind of going on, it truly is everything everywhere all at once. It's like you're with it at times. Like when you're channeling it, you're actually like for real with it. It's not outside of you at all. It's not it's you,
What if I like whole self. What if we called it the higher self because we're still deeply conditioned by hierarchy? Higher consciousness to me just means like more zoomed out. You can see more of the picture. And now we're starting to call it whole self as we are like, what if it always was just all of our points of awareness? But when we were stuck in the mind and the ego, we were cut off from this. So when our other points of awareness, our emotions, our body, our connection to the whole, were communicating with us, we're like, it's a God outside of us. That book I bought recently, The Something Mind, talks about when the brain, we were in the
conscious mind, I think it's called.
I thought it was like the diametrous earth mind or something. Anyway, the earth or the mind was like the two hemispheres weren't communicating or something. So when people had thoughts, they thought it was a god outside of them talking to them.
Yeah.
Or something. I'm butchering that.
Yeah, because the reality, you only understand reality through this like externalization.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because that's a function that I think we had to like learn. Like you have to go through a reality like that. And then you realize like the language that we were given or gave ourselves at that time was malfunctioning in itself because it's built to externalize and label things so we can have a reality. And so that's what like starts to wig me out is like when I'm just using that term because I understand when someone's explaining it, oh, I understand that feeling. That's that connection. I can call it higher self. Okay, great. And then I have to understand through hierarchy to get out of the hierarchy to like be able, I have to use the programming kind of, right?
Yeah.
But then you get to a certain point where I'm like, I'm just in my very nature of saying the word, I externalize it. Mm-hmm. And so you understand like words are magic and they kind of are creating the reality. So then even in my head, I'm like, it's feeling more and more like it isn't somewhere else. I put my attention, I can get my attention to be with it sometimes, and then sometimes I'm not. But it's like changing the word makes like holistic is just kind of like I tune into it, and now I'm more connected to that wholer part, and at times not, and I can sense when that is. So that it just cracked it for me. And etymology is like a really cool way to understand some of the very, very subtle programs that you don't realize, like when you use the word and don't understand the flip on it, you're kind of already making it difficult to get to the more feeling and direct experience of something because the label has like put this externalized thing on it when it actually is not external. It's very, very much here inside, Right. It's so fascinating.
Let's hang up.
Okay.
I have to go. I have to get ready for a live stream, but yeah, this was very interesting. I think it's funny that I was like, I don't get the geometry.
I know there's a way for I think there. Yeah, I'll try to get a good refined condensing that maybe we can do on the podcast, but it's like another form of astrology kind of too, and tarot. Like there's a way to use it to like as a blueprint and a map for like what is going on in your own reality, but then collectively and just the nature of reality, and it's not a necessary thing, but it's a really amazing tool. And it's just the fact that it's like one of those things. I mean, astrology is like relies on geometry, all of it, Geometry and math are two things that are universal. They're truly, we discovered them. They're not, it's been corrupted by people's use of it, right? But like it's beyond that. It's such a framework for helping understand like what is going on.
Oh, that was what. So dense, like the less points of awareness you have in the game, the denser, quote unquote, denser the reality is because you're only able to experience it to one thing. So if you're living in the ego, all you're experiencing is stories, right? So everything in your life is a story. So like I had a friend snapped at me the other day and I got a overwhelm of feelings, and immediately the story generator inside of me was like, they don't understand me, and like was justifying what they snapped at me about or whatever. But because I've experienced an emotional awakening, instead what happened is the 5D awareness went, oh, and the body, the nervous system went, oh, okay, we're in fight or flight. And then the emotional experience went, okay, this is, this feels like rejection. Is it rejection? Are we being rejected? And then it's like, no, we're not being rejected. This person, that's interesting. When you say you offer to do something for this person, they snap at you. What is that? And then I was like curious about the person, and then able to go like over to the nervous system that was now in fight or flight and flip the breaker, you know, and was able to bring myself out of that state. Now, if this would have happened 10 years ago and this person snapped at me because I offered them to do something, I would have needed to get on the phone with every friend I have, run the scenario by them, and have them co-sign my story.
Right.
And I have like lost the will to tell people stories like this anymore, but I would have needed that because I only existed in the ego and the mind. And so I would have needed someone to tell me I was right in order to get that feeling out of my body. But instead I was like, oh, nervous system detected threat. Nervous system is in fight or flight. That's because the nervous system still has a belief that like someone being mad at you is like, did I do something wrong? Like all this stuff. But because I have all these points of awareness now, the game I'm playing now is not, and not because I'm better or whatever, just because these things woke up inside of me. I didn't do anything. I didn't go do a kingship code to access this level of reality. I just like went through an awakening that, you know, I had the mental awakening in 2000 and then stayed there until fucking 2017 when something just turned on and like started waking up. And I would say I'm still actively in an emotional awakening, definitely still actively in a physical awakening. And in many ways, I'm starting to see that 8D awareness where I just kind of have an innate understanding of like how to be in right relationship with things that I didn't have before. Now we know of cultures that knew how to be in right relationship. They had that point of awareness, right? But in a dissension, all you have access to is the ego and maybe the mind. I think a lot of people didn't get the mind really until 2012. That's what the alien said. Like a lot of people were just the stories. And so an interesting thing, like as you reach this point of consciousness, is if you completely cut off the ego and you don't give it something to do, you don't give it an identity, you won't do anything. So a lot of people are like, I'm stuck. Well, you have to tell your ego that you're something so that it can play the character. That's its job. But when you consciously know, I'm going to go be a realtor and you know what I mean? Or I'm going to be an author. I'm going to be, you know, I'm going to go to my villain era, or I'm going to be confrontational now, or whatever. You tell the ego, like, play this character, and it does it. And you can do that consciously. But when we think we are, and then we're being driven by emotion. So like, it was just a crazy moment to be like,
and that's truly, you're describing like sleep, right? It's like in the dream state, you're just at whim of the dream.
Yep.
When you become lucid, you go, oh shit, I can fly. And you go to do that. But
now I'm aware of all these mechanisms. Yeah. And so that to me is what consciousness, unconsciousness is. And then I have memories that might be fake of Atlantis. This is probably opening a can of worms, where we took mushrooms to go back to sleep, which means to turn off our 6, 7, or 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 points of awareness so that we would go into the densest experience you can have in this realm, which is believing that you are your ego, believing that you are the character that you pick up, and then you get programmed by your family of origin into a character that you don't know how to get out of because you don't have any other points of awareness.
Yeah. No, and it does open a can of worms, but I love that because I think that resonates, but there's an interesting thing to talk about, like time. Is Atlantis in the future? And I think yes, and the mushrooms were like an AI simulation, and that's what we're in.
Yeah. Okay. We'll
pick up next week.
We'll pick up next week with that. They'll love that. All right. Love you. Bye.